For a long time now, there has been talk about India emerging as a potential mediator between Russia and Ukraine as the war between the two neighbors rages on even 2.5 years after it began. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said he believes that India, China and Brazil could act as mediators in potential peace talks between his country and Ukraine. Putin has also said that a preliminary agreement reached between Moscow and Kiev in Istanbul during the initial weeks of the war could serve as the basis for the talks. That agreement was, of course, never implemented. Speaking at the plenary session of the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, the Russian president expressed his belief that India and other friendly nations have a sincere interest in resolving all issues with regard to the ongoing war. He said, and I quote, "We respect our friends and partners who I believe are sincerely interested in resolving all issues related to this conflict. This is primarily the People's Republic of China, Brazil and India. I'm constantly in contact with our colleagues on this issue, and I have no doubt that the leaders of these countries, we have a trusting relationship with them, sincerely strive to help understand all the details of this complex process." Putin added, "Are we ready to negotiate with them? We have never refused to do so, but not on the basis of some ephemeral demands, but on the basis of those documents that were agreed upon and actually initiated in Istanbul. We managed to reach an agreement. That is the whole point. The signature of the head of the Ukrainian delegation who initialed this document testifies to this, which means that the Ukrainian side was generally satisfied with the agreements reached." He then went on to say that agreement did not come into force only because they were given a command not to do so, because the elites of the United States and Europe, some European countries, wanted to achieve a strategic defeat of Russia. Remember, the Russia-Ukraine war started with Putin's announcement of a special military operation on 24th February 2022. And there is still no end in sight to the conflict that seems to have only intensified in recent weeks and has undoubtedly proven to be too costly, not only for the warring nations, especially Ukraine, but indeed for the entire international community as the global economy has taken a huge hit. Russia had previously stated that Kiev's incursion into the Kursk region rendered negotiations impossible. Putin has also claimed that Ukraine's Kursk incursion was an attempt to hinder the Russian advance in Donbass, but it ultimately failed as Kiev had inadvertently weakened its forces along the rest of the front. Now, Putin argues that by transferring large, well-trained units into Russia, Ukraine has diminished its own strength, allowing Russia to accelerate its offensive in eastern Ukraine. Putin's latest remarks on mediation come weeks after Prime Minister Modi asserted India's firm commitment to support an early, abiding and peaceful resolution of the conflict during his visit to both Russia and Ukraine. During the recent historic visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Ukraine, India reiterated the need for sincere and practical engagement between all stakeholders to develop innovative solutions that will have broad acceptability and contribute towards early restoration of peace. The reiteration of India's willingness to contribute in all possible ways to facilitate an early return of peace is a clear indication of India's willingness to get involved in the potential peace process in the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's recent diplomatic activities, including his visits to Ukraine and Russia, conversations with US President Joe Biden, followed by a phone conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and upcoming engagements at the UN General Assembly this month and the BRICS summit in Russia in October, have all heightened expectations that India may play a more active role in mediating the Russia-Ukraine conflict. In communications with both the Russian president and the Ukrainian president, Prime Minister Modi has emphasized the need for a cessation of violence. Now, many analysts saw Prime Minister Modi's recent visits to Moscow and Kiev as a balancing act by India, especially after the Prime Minister's visit to Russia, which attracted criticism from Western powers as well as the Ukrainian president. However, many also see it as a genuine attempt at building bridges. By engaging with both Russia and Ukraine, India has positioned itself as a neutral player in the conflict and a responsible global actor committed to peace and stability. This balancing approach aligns with India's historical role as a mediator in international conflicts in the Korean War armistice negotiations, for instance, or the Colombo Plan. India seeks to leverage its unique position as a country that maintains strong ties with both Moscow and Washington to play a more active mediation role. Additionally, India's proposal of mediation adds weight to the ongoing effort from Global South countries in the negotiations. The push from India reinforces its prominence as a leader of the Global South. Of course, it is nobody's case that mediation between Russia and Ukraine would be easy, not by any stretch of imagination. The challenges are aplenty, starting with maximalist positions taken by both sides. Both Russia and Ukraine remain focused on military gains. The refusal of both parties to budge from their stance is a major obstacle in the peace process. President Zelensky demands a complete Russian withdrawal from Ukraine, while President Putin insists Ukraine must pull back from occupied regions and drop its NATO membership bid. The involvement of various international actors in this war highly complicates any negotiation process for peace. And the geopolitical interests of the United States and Russia are deeply entrenched, and both powers are unlikely to agree on a peace proposal proposed by the other. So what can India do? New Delhi has repeatedly called for dialogue and diplomacy to resolve the conflict. Prime Minister Modi told Zelensky in Kiev, India was never neutral. We were always on the side of peace. He added that India was ready to play an active role in the path to peace and progress. The Ukrainian president also expressed confidence that India had a role in bringing peace to the conflict-ridden region. He told Indian journalists, India will play its role. I think India began to recognize that this is not just a conflict, this is a real war of one man, and his name is Putin, against a whole country whose name is Ukraine. You are a big country, you have big influence, and you can stop Putin and halt his economy and put him in his place. Zelensky added a caveat though. He said, I truly believe it would be good if the second peace summit is held in one of the Global South countries. There are countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Turkey. I told Prime Minister Modi that we could have the Global Peace Summit in India. It's a big country and the largest democracy in the world, but we will not be able to conduct a peace summit in a country that has not joined the communique of the first peace summit held in Switzerland in June this year. Now, what did the Istanbul agreement that Putin has referred to actually say? The negotiating teams arrived at the following communique, and I quote, key provisions of the Treaty on Ukraine's security guarantees a framework of a possible agreement. The treaty would declare Ukraine to be allowed to apply for European Union membership and to be a neutral state, put a limit on the size of its military forces, seize NATO membership plans, forbid foreign military bases, and list Russia and Western countries, amongst which were the United States and the UK, as guarantors obliged to assist Ukraine in case of aggression against it. The status of Crimea would have to be negotiated after 10 to 15 years. But since then, the two sides have grown further and further away from these provisions. So what can be the way forward, really? And what role can India play in thrashing out that elusive peace deal between Russia and Ukraine?